down.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks. Still there at 70? They kick back up. 95. Kind of feels like it in spots. Good evening. Welcome. You know, after this, I'm going to ask you, you have to really be on your best behavior because I know there's food after this. And I've already been warned that by Mr. Miller in the back. He hasn't had his dinner yet, and it is 6:32. So, hang in there. All right. You're it's not easy. It's not easy. So, kind of wild that we're having this in the evening, isn't it? And it's like last night, it was funny getting ready because I'm thinking, oh, we don't have to be up. What did you do this morning? Did you have like an extra cup of coffee? I got some Adirondack chairs painted that I've been trying to get painted for a while. I had some work, and I had them primed, and I got that done today. I got to listen to some of the Indians game. Mrs. Evans and I went on a long walk. We went on a long walk today. It's been a great day. And now we get to come here and worship, which is fun, and we get to play wiffle ball and eat, and it's going to be great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of what I think is the first Sunday evening service. Pretty exciting stuff. Let me pray, and I got a few things I'd like to share. Most gracious God, we thank you for the gift of this day, a hot summer, sunny day. And we are grateful that we were included in it, that we got to be a part. So we thank you for this evening, for the chance we have to gather together and the chance we have to eat together, to fellowship together afterwards and just have some fun. So we ask that you continue to work in this time. Lord, we pray for the one who teaches, that you would forgive him his sins, for they are many. We have come to this place to see Jesus and him only. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I think my third, actually the second where I got to see any amount, Blue Tip Parade this year. Pretty amazing. First time I've ever gotten to walk in it. Pretty neat deal. So a couple things we're watching. This is, and I won't mention any names so I don't embarrass anyone. But it was different people had different strategies. Debbie said before 25,000 pieces of candy, and so I think the official rules are like you're just supposed to throw it gently at their feet. But I really like the aggressive nature of some of our adults. And so sometimes you'd get yourself into a situation such as this where people would be like, there are rows of people, and where just a little throw at the feet simply isn't going to get the candy there. It just won't do it. So some, this was fun. This was a fun thing. Some would, well, like there was, and I was really proud of Reese and Ainsley because they would like yell out, go, "Arr!" if you want some candy. And so people would have to actually compete in loudness in order to get candy. And then some of the adults, and the kids were fine. It's really the adults that we have problems with here at any kind of these events that we do. And so there are these people way in the back, and the idea was to lob the candy to the people in the back. And as I understand it from different police reports and those kind of things, what actually took place was the candy, in order to get it far, it had to have a pretty significant amount of thrust behind it in order to get it far enough. But I think the error of judgment was simply in trajectory. I think the arc was off, and instead of an arcing trajectory, it was more of a direct trajectory, and the poor people sitting in the front row, they never had a chance. And so after some bags of ice and forehead, it was really, so I'm not sure we're passing out candy or accosting certain people with it, but that was fun. Then the other kind of fun thing was Addie. I got to spend a lot of the pre and post parade with Addie and Landon and the Doyle clan. We hung out at Larry and Viv's, if you're kind of in. Larry and Viv. So we were at Larry and Viv's. So Addie was a little disappointed because she saw wheels in the parade. And the parade is called a float. So you can see her, it's understandable, isn't it? So Addie thought, she was disappointed when she saw the wheels because she thought it was going to be much more like a hovercraft kind of thing, where things were going to just kind of float by. And granted, I was a little disappointed too after kind of seeing that. So we arrived early at the Doyles, Mom and Dad Doyle. That's Larry and Viv, if you're in the family. And and they obviously don't know me very well because I got like a standing invitation for the next number of years to show up at their house. If they would have talked to Susan, they would have seen how clearly that was very poor judgment on their part. But the invitation has been extended now, so I'm planning to take advantage of that each and every year. So we hang out, we're having fun, and there's hot dogs and watermelon and all kinds of great stuff. And this is what I learned this year is like I think people go out next week and plot out their places in the parade for next year. And like they have standing places where they go every season and watch the parade. And the Doyles there's espresso makers and tents and baristas, and it's an amazing display, cotton candy machines, and people are out there all lined up. So I'm ready, marching the parade. Josh and Christy give me a ride back with Addie and Landon, and we get back and we go out to catch the last couple of floats, or they have wheels on them. So we go back and we're kind of watching the end of the parade, and there's a gentleman, I don't know, Josh isn't in here, the guy's singing. Who was that guy? Tony? It was pretty exciting, and we're watching him sing at the end of the parade, and unfortunately for Tony, he was right behind the Medina County Sheriff's Mounted Police Force. Kind of puts a damper on the parade, but nonetheless, he was doing well, and things are going along, and we're having a grand time at the Blue Tip Parade, and we're having fun, and the parade ends, and people begin to pack up, and I was just taking it all in. I was just really, really grateful. It was just one of those moments where you're just grateful to be a part of something, and people include you, and relationship, and talking. And before I knew it, Josh comes up to me. Well, the first thing on the way out, Landon was so excited to see Grandpa Larry. And like as soon as he made eye contact with Larry, he ran to Larry. And that's his grandpa, as I said, and was just glad to see him. And he's having fun, and then all the celebration and stuff. So we're standing there, and towards, I don't know, a few minutes went by. I see Josh comes up with Addie. He puts her hand in mine, and he says, "You stay with Pastor Mark." And I could tell there was it wasn't regular Josh. It wasn't like, "Hey, you stay with Pastor Mark, I'm going to go clean up after the horses," or anything like that. There was an urgency. There was a seriousness in not only in his voice, but in his demeanor. And what I realized is, Addie took my hand, and what I realized is Landon was no longer with us. So Josh is looking around, no Landon. I see him and Christy kind of touch base, and Josh heads up the street, literally up the street, looking and kind of trying to get his bearings and searching, and Christy went down and around the corner. I saw her go back to Larry and Viv's and look at the house. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that with your kids, but you have this overwhelming sense of desperation and dread and panic, and you're not sure what to do or what you can do or what's the right thing to do or which way should I go or where should I look. And all you want to do is find your kid. And you want to be able to grab them and maybe yell at them and then grab them again. And you just want to know they're okay. And you just want to take them home. So Landon was just fine. Landon was okay. After a pretty stern lecture with Josh, I learned later about not leaving the group and about he couldn't go home yet because not everybody was ready to go. Landon decided he was going to go home. And if no one else was going to go with him, he was just going to go on his own. So Christy, by the time she got back, 2 or 3 houses down the street, he had a pretty good walk by himself. She saw him walking up the driveway to head into the grandma and grandpa's house. So you can imagine how grateful Josh and Christy were. I mean, if you've ever been in that, if you've lost sight of your kid for an instant in the culture we live in today, I mean, I'm sure it's always been bad, but all kinds of horrible things go through your mind. So we were all grateful. I think we celebrated maybe a little more that evening. We were filled with joy and gratitude and thanksgiving. Landon was just fine. So in the span of just a few minutes, the Doyle clan kind of understood in a new way the reality of lostness, foundness, and rejoicing. There was this sense of oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And oh my goodness, I'm so glad you're okay. And oh, we are so blessed. It is so good you're fine, and we can celebrate as a family. And so that feeling, all of those feelings, lostness, foundness, rejoicing, these feelings provide us with a wonderful glimpse, evidently, of what it feels like to be God. Jesus tells this incredible story in the Gospel of Luke. And I don't know if you've ever thought it, but have you ever had the thought, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to be God? Somehow to be this all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful being. And yet what we know at the center and what Jesus tried to tell us is that this God is personal, that he's relational, that he wants to be connected with you and with me. And evidently, if we're asking the question, what does it feel like to be God? It feels a little bit like you're a shepherd and you have 100 sheep and you lose one. And it feels a little bit like this woman that had 10 coins, probably her most valuable possession, and she loses one of her 10 coins. And she goes out and she searches her entire house for it. And it feels a little bit like a father who had 2 sons and he loses one of his sons. And next week we'll talk about, actually he lost 2 sons. We'll talk about that a little bit. So evidently, to be God feels like a shepherd, and you have 100 sheep, and because you're a good shepherd, you keep an eye on all those sheep, and when one wanders away, just one, when one stupid sheep wanders away, you leave the flock, evidently. You leave the flock, and you go and you search and you look until you find that one stupid sheep. And then when you find it, you throw it on your shoulders and you bring it back to the flock. And then you call all your shepherd friends. And you say, hey, guess what? I lost my sheep. Just one. I had 100, but I like this one. And I found it. Come, because we're gonna celebrate. And he says, if you ever wonder what it feels like to be God, it's kind of like a woman who has 10 coins. These 10 coins were probably part of a wedding gift from her family, kind of a ceremonial kind of thing, where it was probably part of a headdress or some type of clothing that these 10 coins, maybe family heirlooms, maybe really valuable, were a part of, and she lost one of them. And so she loses one, and losing it, she thinks, I don't know, I mean, it was here last time I looked for it. And so she searches her entire house. And then she finds it. And when she finds it, she calls all of her friends. And she says, you won't believe it, but you know that coin I lost? Just that one coin? I lost it. And now I've found it, and I just want you to come over because I am just so excited about it. It's here. The whole thing's back together again. Come, eat, celebrate with me. In the story we'll look at tonight, Jesus says God's he feels a little bit like a father. Maybe Jesus' favorite word for him. He called his heavenly Father Abba. And he said it's a little bit like a father who has 2 sons. And like I said, we'll talk about this older son later. We'll talk about him next week. But there's this younger son. And this younger son thought, you know what, I know where life is, and it's not here with my dad. I know where life is, and it's somewhere else, and I'm going to go. I'm going to take what's mine. I'm going to go. I really don't want a relationship with my dad anyway, right? But I would like his money. So I'm going to ask for my inheritance, and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to spend it on what I want to spend it on because it's my life. And so he goes, and the father lets him go. And the father doesn't know if or when the son is going to come home. And that's where we're going to pick up the story. What does it feel like to be God? Tonight, I don't want you just to think about, well, maybe this is true for everyone else. I want you to think about, what does this say about God and his view of me? So picking up from Luke 15, it says, by this time, a lot of men, and this will be important more for next week's message, who's listening, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around Jesus, listening intently. It's amazing how many people loved being around Jesus, but not the religious people. It wasn't the folks that came to synagogue or to the church. It was the other folks. They loved being with him. They loved being around him. Loved being in his company. So there's two kinds of people in this story. These folks that love to be around Jesus, the outsiders. We could argue the younger brothers. And then there are the older brothers. The Pharisees and the religion scholars were not pleased, not at all pleased. They growled. Greek word there is they grumbled. Religious people are good at growling and grumbling. It says he takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends. And their grumbling triggered this story. And Jesus talks about sheep, and he talks about a lost coin, and then he talks about lost people. He said there was once a man who had 2 sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, I want right now what's coming to me." So the father divided the property between them, and it wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. And after he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through the country, and he began to hurt. And he signed on with a citizen there who assigned them to his fields to slop the pigs. He was so hungry, he would have eaten the corn cobs and the pig slop, but no one would give him any. And that brought him to his senses. And he said, all those farmhands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going to go back to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. And he got up, and he went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out. He embraced him and kissed him. The son started his speech, Father, I've sinned against God and I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father, he wasn't listening. He was calling the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead and is now alive. Given up for lost and now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. Scholars tell us that this was a very familiar story, and Jesus changed the ending. The story was the son is kicked out and isn't part of the family anymore because of his disobedience. And Jesus said it's important you understand that's not the kind of God I'm talking about. That's not the kind of God that's not my Abba. Henry Nouwen, was a Catholic man, passed away a number of years ago. I want you to come to grips with something, and then I'm going to close with one more story. Again, don't make this story about everybody else. Make this story about how God feels about you. Here's what Henry Nouwen says. God rejoices. Fun to think about. I think that last song talked about something about God dancing. What does that look like? Zephaniah, 3:17, I think, talks about that God will dance over you like on a day of festival. Over you. God dances. Evidently, the Father runs on occasion when he sees lost sons coming home. Nouwen says, God rejoices, not because, so important, listen to this. God rejoices not because the problems of the world have been solved, not because all human pain and suffering have come to an end, nor because thousands of people have been converted and are now praising him for his goodness. Listen to this line. God rejoices because one of his children who was lost has been found. Just one. Just one. God rejoices. Modern day version of this story. Young girl grows up on a cherry orchard just above Traverse City, Michigan. Her parents, a bit old-fashioned, tend to overreact to her nose ring, the music she listens to, and the length of her skirts. They ground her a few times, and she seethes inside. "I hate you," she screams at her father as he knocks on the door of her room after an argument. And that night, she acts on a plan she's mentally rehearsed scores of times before she runs away. She's visited Detroit only once before on a bus trip with her youth group to watch the Tigers play. Because newspapers in Traverse City report in lurid details the gangs, the drugs, and the violence in downtown Detroit, she concludes this is probably the last place her parents will ever look for her, if they look for her at all. Her second day there, she meets a man who drives the biggest car she's ever seen. He offers her a ride, buys her lunch, and even arranges a place for her to stay. And he gives her some pills that make her feel better than she's ever felt before. And she decides she was right all along. Her parents have been keeping her from all the fun. The good life continues for a month or 2 months, really almost a year, and she lives in a penthouse. She orders room service whenever she wants, and occasionally she thinks about all the folks back home, but their lives now seem so boring and provincial. She can hardly even believe she grew up there. She has a brief scare when she sees her picture printed on the back of a milk carton with the headline, "Have you seen this child?" But by now she has blonde hair, and with all the makeup and body-piercing jewelry she wears, nobody would mistake her for a child. Besides, most of her friends are runaways. After a year, the first signs of illness appear, and it amazes her how fast the boss turns mean. "Can't mess around these days," he growls, and before she knows it, she's out on the street without a penny to her name. She still turns a couple of tricks a night, but they don't pay too much, and all the money goes to support her habit. So when winter blows in, she finds herself sleeping on metal grates outside the big department stores, and sleeping is probably the wrong word for a teenage girl at night in downtown Detroit. Dark bands circle her eyes, and her cough worsens. One night as she lies awake listening for footsteps, all of a sudden, everything about her life looks different. She no longer feels like a woman of the world. She feels like a little girl in a cold, dark, frightening city. And she begins to cry. Her pocket's empty. She's hungry. She needs a fix. So she pulls her legs tightly underneath her and shivers under the newspaper she's piled atop of her coat. Something jolts a memory, and a single image fills her mind. May, in Traverse City, when 1,000,000 cherry trees blossom at once, with her golden retriever dashing through the rows of blossoming trees in chase of a tennis ball. "God, why did I leave?" she says to herself. "My dog back home eats better than I do." She's crying harder now, sobbing, and she knows more than anything else, she just wants to go home. 3 straight phone calls, 3 straight connections with the answering machine. She hangs up without leaving a message the first 2 times. But the 3rd time she says, "Dad, Mom, it's me. I was wondering about maybe coming home. I'm catching a bus up your way, and it'll be there about midnight tomorrow. And if you're not there, I guess I'll just stay on the bus until it hits Canada." It takes about 7 hours for a bus to make all the stops between Detroit and Traverse City, and during that time, she realizes all the flaws of her plan. What if her parents are out of town and miss the message? Shouldn't she have waited another day or 2 so she could talk to them? Even if they're home, they probably wrote her off as dead a long time before now. She probably should have given them a little time to overcome the shock. So her thoughts bounce back and forth between those worries and the speech she's preparing to give her father. "Dad, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. It's not your fault, it's mine. Can you forgive me? She says the words over and over, her throat tightening even as she rehearses them, but she hasn't apologized to anyone in years. The bus has been driving with lights on since Bay City. Tiny snowflakes hit the pavement, rubbed worn by thousands of tires. She's forgotten how dark it gets at night out here. Oh God, she thinks. When the bus finally rolls into the station, its air brakes hissing in protest, the driver announces in a crackly voice over the microphone, 15 minutes, folks, that's all the time we have here. 15 minutes to decide her life. She checks herself in the compact mirror, smooths her hair, licks the lipstick off her teeth, and she looks at the tobacco stains on her fingertips and wonders if her parents will notice, if they're there. She walks into the terminal not knowing what to expect, and not one of the 1,000 scenes that have played out in her mind prepare her for what she sees. There in the concrete walls and plastic chairs bus terminal in Traverse City, Michigan, stands a group of 40 brothers and sisters and great aunts and uncles and cousins and a grandmother and great-grandmother to boot. They're all wearing those goofy, pointy party hats and blowing noisemakers. And taped across the wall of the terminal is one of those horribly computer-generated banners that reads, "Welcome home." And out, listen to this part. Out of the crowd of well-wishers breaks her dad. She stares through the tears quivering in her eyes like hot mercury and begins her memorized speech. "Dad, I'm so sorry." He interrupts her. "Hush, child. We've no time for that. No time for apologies. You'll be late for the party. There's a banquet waiting for you at home." There's a banquet waiting. The reason that story resonates so deep with us, the reason why any great story, the whole Cleveland Cavaliers, the whole thing, had LeBron never left, this wouldn't have been nearly such a great story. But it's about reconciliation. It's about restoration. And the reason those stories resonate so deep with us is because that's how the universe is designed. You and I were made for relationship with God. And do you have any idea how far He will go to make sure you know how loved you are? Evidently, the universe is not too big of a distance for Him to go. God rejoices not because all the problems of the world have been solved, not because all human pain and suffering have come to an end, nor because thousands of people have been converted and are now praising Him for His goodness. No, God rejoices. God rejoices because one of His children have come home. One of His children that was lost has been found. And what if this story isn't about everyone else's? What if the one is you? In all of those stories, lost sheep, lost coins, and lost son, when the lost thing is found, there's a great celebration. There's a party. It says the angels in heaven rejoice. Evidently, God dances. Just one. Just one. I'm going to play a song. It's a song called Prodigal. And the worship team doesn't need to come back up. You guys can relax. And during this song, there will be, we'll take the offering. And I'll come up and give the benediction. And then Mr. Miller, then I believe after the benediction, you can run and be first in line for the, or at least walk quickly and be first in line. So that's just a heads up to Jimmy. He's leaving now. He's already on his way, just to get a head start. And then we'll have we can go out and celebrate.